Welcome to the deep dive. Today, we're looking past what many people think recovery is all about, just, not drinking or using.
Right, we're going deeper.
We're exploring that really profound internal shift, the thing that makes long-term meaningful sobriety actually stick. We're talking about the spiritual experience or the psychic change.
Exactly, because if you've spent any time with recovery literature, you'll hear that getting sober is just the foundation. Famously, it's called just a bare beginning.
A beginning. That sounds counterintuitive to someone just starting out.
Well, think about it. If you just stop the substance, but that internal state, the mental obsession, the deep-seated self-centeredness, if that stays the same, you're just incredibly vulnerable, right?
Makes sense. White-knuckling it, basically.
Precisely. So our mission today is to really get into the mechanics of that internal transformation, the one you need to build a life that's actually protected against relapse.
Oh, we'll be looking at how it's defined.
Yeah, how it's defined, where the ideas came from, like the clinical side of things early on, and also the psychological framework, especially from William James. We want to understand this new state of consciousness.
And we're drawing on some really personal stuff here, anecdotes from early recovery stories, Dr. Silkworth's crucial clinical insights, and William James's heavy-duty psychology.
Right, and the core puzzle, the paradox we really need to tackle is this. How does someone who's defined by, isolating self-will, how do they make that leap?
A leap to a totally new state of consciousness, one that leads to genuine happiness, feeling connected, being useful. It seems like a huge jump.
It is a huge jump. That shift from isolation to connection is, well, it's everything. One source really nails it, describing the addicted mind as projecting this universe of just grasping and alienation.
Grasping and alienation, wow.
Yeah. And the spiritual experience, the psychic change, it's the process that just completely flips that internal projection. It changes your inner world so profoundly that the outer world starts to look different too.
So it's not just stopping a behavior.
No, not at all. It's a complete internal overhaul.
Okay, so to kick off this deep dive, we have to start somewhere maybe a bit uncomfortable. The prerequisite for all this change.
Utter defeat. Has to be.
Yeah, the literature's really clear on this, isn't it? The spiritual awakening, it seems, must come after admitting you're totally powerless over alcohol or whatever the substance is, and that life has just become unmanageable. Step one, right?
Step one. And it's crucial to get the defeat here isn't just like giving up because things are bad externally. It's an internal thing. It's the collapse of your whole self-reliance model.
The idea that I can handle this.
Exactly. That has to crumble. And what usually drives it is the sheer agony of those repeated cycles.
Yeah.
The spiral tightening.
Can you walk us through that cycle?
Yeah, it's this terrifying loop.
Yeah.
You drink, maybe pass out, wake up just full of terror and remorse.
Only to
Drink again, right? To escape feeling like you're in hell. The shakes, the thoughts just racing, running wild. It's brutal.
And that really gets to the core problem of the alcoholic personality, doesn't it? Relying on self-will. But that very self-will, that obsession, is what's driving you deeper into that dark pit of hallucinations, blackouts, and despair.
It's the ultimate irony.
Yeah.
You try harder to control it using your willpower,
Yeah.
and that just makes the obsession grip tighter.
Yeah, you hear stories, right? People who think, I'm smart, I'm successful, I should be able to handle this one thing, and the repeated failure, it's not just demoralizing.
It's devastating, especially to the ego. The literature's full of these stories, people losing jobs, families, everything, and yet that deep remorse flips almost instantly into thinking about the next drink, the relief it promises.
It's that agonizing moment of realizing that you, yourself, your ego, it's fundamentally broken when it comes to this one specific thing.
That's the core of it, that recognition.
So many of those early folks talk about hitting a bottom, and it sounds like it was often just agonizingly reached. It wasn't always like the dramatic movie scene bottom.
No, not always the gutter. Sometimes it was just this cold, quiet realization on a random Tuesday morning. I can't fight this anymore. I give up.
Okay, but how do you make sure that agony, that hitting bottom, leads to growth? How does it not just lead to more despair, paralysis?
That's where the clinical framework becomes absolutely essential. And that's where Dr. William Silkworth comes in. His analysis, it was indispensable. It gave the early members a way to understand their failure intellectually without getting trapped in shame.
Shame being the driver of despair.
Exactly. Silkworth basically, as they put it, taught us how to till the black soil of hopelessness out of which every single spiritual awakening has since flowered. He gave them a non-shaming explanation.
Okay, let's park here for a moment because this clinical diagnosis, those shattering phrases they used to describe it, seems like the intellectual key. It unlocks the ego's defenses. So what exactly was his diagnosis? Why was it so revolutionary back in the 1930s?
Silkworth boiled it down to two distinct things happening. First, the physical allergy of the body, meaning once an alcoholic takes a drink, a physical craving kicks in that's completely beyond their conscious control. They can't just have one or two.
Okay, the allergy, what was the second part?
The second was the mental obsession of the mind, this compulsion, this irrational thought process that makes you take that first drink, even when all logic, all past experience screams that it's a terrible idea.
An allergy and an obsession.
Yeah. And that combination, he said, condemns the untreated alcoholic to either go mad or die. Strong words, but that was his clinical assessment.
I can see the power in that. If the problem is framed as an allergy and an obsession, these sort of medical involuntary things, it takes the moral judgment right out of it, doesn't it? The judgment the alcoholic is constantly heaping on themselves.
Absolutely. That diagnosis gave them the tools with which to puncture the toughest alcoholic ego. Think about it. If I tell myself I failed because I'm weak, I'm morally bad, my ego can argue with that, right?
Yeah.
It can resist, it can feel shame, which just fuels the desire to escape, usually by drinking.
But if a doctor says,
Right. If a doctor tells me, look, clinically, biologically, you have a physical abnormality and a mental compulsion that makes it impossible for you to control this through willpower alone, well, what's the ego going to argue with then? It loses its basis for self-reliance in this area and, crucially, its basis for beating itself up.
so hitting bottom is really just the point where the ego is finally cornered, forced to accept the clinical reality that its biggest strength, self-reliance, is completely useless against alcohol.
Exactly. And that acceptance, that clinical defeat of step one, it naturally leads you to look elsewhere. It forces that pivotal turn towards a higher power you see in steps 2 and 3.
The intellectual bridge to the spiritual solution. If the part of you that's supposed to be in charge, your will, is failing, you have to look outside yourself.
That's the moment of surrender. Step 2. Just coming to believe that maybe, possibly, some power greater than yourself could restore you to sanity. And step 3, making a decision to turn your will and your life over to the care of that power as you understand it.
And the experience of that surrender, it sounds like it varies a lot from person to person. It's not always one way.
Oh, incredibly varied. For some people, it is instantaneous. There's that famous story of one of the co-founders, right?
Yeah.
In this moment of just complete defeat, no hope or faith, whatever, he just cried out, made an appeal, and boom, step 1 and step 3 happened right there, instantly. He felt set free.
That immediate liberation, you hear that a lot.
You do. But for many others, maybe most, it's preceded by weeks, months, even years of intellectual wrestling. That's why step 2, just coming to believe, is so critical. It's the willingness phase.
Yeah, it's often described as this glorious release from being all alone. That crushing isolation just lifts. But what about people who really struggle with the whole God concept, that icy intellectual mountain, as the book calls it? How does the literature suggest getting over that?
Well, often the breakthrough comes when you realize that the insanity and the ego were, as they put it, curiously linked. The insistence on having all the answers, on being the sole master of your fate, that was part of the insanity.
Ah, okay.
So the solution becomes simpler. Willingness. They basically say, look, choose your own conception of God, whatever works for you. That intellectual blockage, that mountain, it starts to melt the moment you realize you don't need a specific theology or some sudden religious feeling.
You just need to accept.
You just need to accept that maybe, just maybe, you're not the ultimate power in the universe. That's it. Once you open that door, even just a crack intellectually, you're standing in the sunlight at last.
It's that moment you realize that dependence, the very thing the alcoholic personality fought against, seeing it as weakness, is actually where the strength comes from. That's a huge psychological flip, isn't it?
That's the paradox.
Yeah.
That's the core of the shift. Okay, so we've laid the groundwork. The defeat, the surrender, now we can actually define the payoff. What is this transformation? The literature consistently calls the result of working the steps a gift, something that amounts to a new state of consciousness and being.
Right. This is the psychic change we're aiming to understand.
This is it.
But you know, a lot of people come into recovery maybe expecting fireworks, a sudden miraculous, earth-shattering conversion, and they might feel disappointed if they don't get that thunder and lightning moment. What does this new state of consciousness actually feel like for most people?
That's a really important point. Usually what happens is much quieter. It's not necessarily that Damascus Road blinding light experience. It's more often a profound sense of well-being, a feeling of peace that just gradually replaces the inner turmoil, the anxiety, the underlying insanity of the obsession.
So it creeps up on you almost.
In a way, yes,
Yeah.
and the sources are clear.
Hmm.
The degree you experience this new dimension, this peace, it's in direct proportion to how sincerely and deeply you practice the 12 steps.
Mm.
It's something that's earned through action, not just magically bestowed.
That makes sense. It puts the focus on it being an ongoing process, not a one-off event. And the results scale with the effort you put in. Now, this whole idea of spiritual conversion, it has history, right? Deep roots, especially with the Oxford group and Dr. Carl Jung's influence on the early guys.
Absolutely. The early pioneers were definitely influenced by the concept of spiritual conversion that Jung had discussed with Roland H., one of the key figures before AA was formed. The core idea Jung passed on was that the individual needed a vital spiritual experience to be taken out of themselves, basically.
And the Oxford group provided the how.
Pretty much. They adopted methods from the Oxford group practice, which gave a kind of structure to achieving that conversion. It wasn't just a vague hope. There were concrete things to do.
And those were the principles like absolute surrender, sharing, like in step 5, committing to life-changing, and that fearless dealing with sin, which sounds like making amends.
Exactly those.
Hmm.
And when the early members really put these into practice, the change wasn't just internal. It was visible. People noticed. The group started becoming a challenge to others' perception of alcoholics. They had shining faces, a real joy in living that showed up through their actions.
So it wasn't just sitting around navel-gazing.
Not at all. It was outward expression. That joy, that transformation based on doing things differently, especially selfless action, that was the proof. That was the evidence that the psychic change was real and working.
Now, to give this whole experience a more, maybe, rigorous psychological framework, we have to bring in William James. His book, The Varieties of Religious Experience, it seems like it provides the language to understand this. How did James describe states like the ones people find in recovery?
James was fascinating because he studied these experiences scientifically, or as much as you could then. He saw that mystical states, whether they hit suddenly or came on gradually, were incredibly profound. They often involved this sense of being wrought on by a higher control.
He wasn't focused on where it came from, necessarily.
No, he was more interested in the results, the effects on the person's life. And he argued that the core feeling in these religious or spiritual experiences was what he called a sthenic affection.
Okay, sthenic affection, that's definitely a specialized term. We need to unpack that one. What does that actually mean for the person feeling it?
Yeah, it sounds academic, but it basically translates to an excitement that's cheerful, expansive, dynamogenic, think dynamic generating. It's like a surge of positive energy, vitality, purpose that replaces the exhaustion, the fear, the sort of grayness of the addicted life.
So it gives you energy.
Yeah, it imparts endurance, a zest for life, where the old self is kind of paralyzed by fear, resentment, self-pity. The new self feels energized, ready for action specifically, the action of helping other people, which is key later on.
Okay, so if addiction was about energy depletion and this narrow, fearful focus on the self, the spiritual experience is like an infusion of robust, positive, emotional energy. It makes you expansive. That sounds a lot like that set-free feeling we talked about, but with a psychological explanation.
It really is. And James makes another crucial point. This transformation doesn't rely on logic. It comes from an unreasoned and immediate assurance. He says if a person feels the presence of a living God or a higher power, logical arguments against it just bounce off. They won't change that core faith or feeling.
So the intellectual acceptance in step 2 kind of gives way to something deeper.
Exactly. It becomes this deep internal conviction that the problem has been solved or is being solved by a power outside of yourself.
And that conviction becomes the deep thing in us, right? It goes beyond logic, beyond what skeptics might say. What does that immediate assurance give you internally?
According to James, it brings this sense of central safety. The kingdom is within. It's like the battle is over. The person feels they're done with human theories as to the origin, meaning, or destiny of the race. It means you're no longer constantly fighting yourself or the universe. There's an inner certainty, a serenity that replaces that constant self-generated chaos.
And that internal stability, that safety, it leads right into this idea of giving birth to the self, doesn't it? The psychic change as growth, as expansion.
Yeah.
Because the old self was so locked down.
That's exactly right. The addicted self is described as utterly one-dimensional. Everything, absolutely everything, revolves around the substance, getting it, using it, hiding it, protecting the ability to keep using it. Real recovery, true psychic change, is an internal journey towards recognizing yourself and redefining yourself.
There's a great quote about that.
Yeah, one definition puts it beautifully. Recovery is when you look inside and begin to ask, what do I think? What do I feel? What is my truth?
That shifts everything, doesn't it? From trying to manage how others see you to listening to what's inside.
Absolutely. It's about learning to resonate inside yourself, as one source puts it. Figuring out what's actually true for you, not just what you think will please other people or get you out of trouble.
Mm.
And the self expands, right, from that narrow, one-dimensional addicted self to a multifaceted self in relationship to others and to God.
So you start building an inner life.
You cultivate an inner life with values, real feelings, beliefs. And the psychic change is really the integration of that richer inner life with how you act in the outer world. It allows you to finally choose, and maybe more importantly, sustain honest, healthy relationships where you can actually be yourself.
So even if you didn't have that big thunder and lightning moment, the proof that the psychic change is underway is just seeing that internal movement, that growth towards expansion, towards self-honesty.
Exactly. It's often a quiet miracle, a miracle of maturation, really. Now, while that spiritual experience, that psychic change, gives you the initial push, the shift in consciousness, it's definitely not like a one-time vaccination against future problems. The wisdom of the literature is really blunt about this. Sobriety is a daily reprieve contingent on the maintenance of our spiritual condition.
A daily reprieve, contingent on maintenance. That word maintenance can sometimes sound like a chore, like drudgery. But the way it's used here, it sounds more like continuous action, the action needed to stay in that new state of consciousness.
That's exactly it. And why is maintenance so hard, even after you've had some kind of profound spiritual awakening? Because the spiritual life isn't just a theory you believe in. It works, yes, but you have to live it every day.
The initial steps bring the freedom, the release.
Right, they bring liberation, but they don't just magically erase years, maybe decades, of destructive living. The recovery process is described as a long period of reconstruction. You stop the drinking you're using, sure, but now you've got to face the wreckage, right?
Financial problems, broken relationships.
Exactly. Character defects, deep-seated fears. Those things don't just vanish because you made a decision back in step 3. You literally have to reconstruct your life piece by piece, brick by brick.
And that reconstruction work is basically done by working through all the steps. Step 9, making direct amends, is often called the entry into the final phase of those initial steps, right? Once you've done that, the focus shifts to keeping it going. Daily vigilance, step 10.
Step 10 is the engine for sustained psychic change. It requires us to promptly acknowledge when we were wrong. That promptness is key. It's about humbly connecting with others, keeping things right.
And it involves watching out for those old patterns.
Constantly. Watching for the core defects, the big 4 as they're sometimes called. Selfishness, dishonesty, resentment, and fear. And the crucial instruction is, when you spot them cropping up, you deal with them immediately. Through prayer, talking about it, maybe making another amends if needed. No letting things fester.
That makes sense. If the addicted self just sat in resentment, stewed in fear, step 10 is the immediate countermove. But what's the difference between just, say, checking yourself at the end of the day and a real step 10 review?
That's a deep nuance. The real review involves reflecting on what we own and what we don't. It's about figuring out what is genuinely our responsibility, what we caused, what we need to set right, and then, critically, letting go of the outcome of other people's problems or reactions.
Okay, explain that letting go part more.
Well, the danger is you can still be self-centered, even when trying to do the right thing. Like trying to control how someone reacts to your amends, or getting sucked into fixing someone else's life because it makes you feel needed or powerful. Step 10 helps you sort out, this is mine to fix, that is theirs to deal with.
That sounds crucial for maintaining balance, because if I get all consumed with anger or resentment about something I actually can't control, something external, I'm immediately throwing myself off balance, risking that serenity I found.
Precisely. The practice is to catch the feeling, the resentment, the fear, the dishonesty, acknowledge it, trace it back to maybe a specific fear or selfish motive, and then constructively release it. Talk to someone trusted, pray about it. Don't let it just sit there and consume you, potentially triggering that old mental obsession again.
And the key is promptness. Shorten that gap between the trigger, an insult, a fear, whatever, and the healthy reaction.
Yes. Keep the spiritual condition intact.
Okay, then we move to step 11. The discipline of thought. Maintaining the connection through serious meditation and prayer. Why do the books say this step often gets slighted even by people active in recovery?
Good question. I think it's because it requires stillness. And stillness can feel, well, terrifying or at least uncomfortable for people who are used to constant internal chaos or external drama. Even someone with years of sobriety can start slipping away from the program, as they say, by neglecting step 11.
They get caught up in life.
Yeah, they get busy career, family, even doing service work, and they forget about the primary fuel source and neglect the conscious contact.
So step 11 is about actively cultivating that central safety we talked about from William James, making time for it.
Exactly. And there's a distinction made between just, saying prayers, maybe asking for things, and the more serious step 11 work.
What's the difference?
Well, simple prayer might be petitioning. Please help me with this. Give me that. The deeper step 11 work is more about asking for knowledge of God's will for us and the power to carry that out. Recognizing, as the text says, clearly, we shall never know freedom under God until we try to seek his will for us.
So shifting from demanding to seeking guidance.
Yes. And the meditation part is crucial too. That's the listening part. The quiet time spent trying to connect, to understand how to apply the program's principles to the challenges of the day ahead or reflecting on the day past.
And the practical payoff of all this daily work, step 10 vigilance, step 11 connection, is what?
It's about maintaining a state of serenity and connectivity, keeping that conscious contact open so that the old harmful patterns like getting obsessed with sex or power or money or just chronic selfishness, they become less alluring. The positive pull of this new spiritual life starts to genuinely outweigh the desperate negative pull of the old life.
And the ultimate result of all this maintenance, this daily work, is seeing that new self actually integrate successfully with the world, especially in relationships.
Absolutely. That's a huge part of it. The recovery process gives you the clarity, the sanity to make different choices about relationships, to choose ones that are actually healthy, honest, and you become capable of sustaining them,
Relationships where you can be real.
where you can be true to yourself and true to the other person, ideally free from all that old manipulation and control and fear. And other qualities start to become not just nice ideas, but necessary for your own peace of mind. Things like compassion, gratitude, forgiveness. They start to replace the old standbys of resentment and anger.
I remember reading that description of resentment as being tied to someone by a cosmic link. That's a powerful image, like an invisible chain.
It really is, because you hold on to that resentment thinking you're punishing the other person,
Right.
but you're the one who's actually drinking the poison, staying chained to them emotionally.
So the forgiveness process in recovery.
It's intensely practical, almost selfish in the best way. You forgive primarily to break that cosmic link, to set yourself free. That's how you protect your spiritual condition, how you maintain that psychic change. It's about your own freedom and peace.
Okay, so we've talked about the internal change, the maintenance. But the ultimate proof, the ultimate confirmation of this spiritual experience isn't just feeling peaceful inside, is it? It's about external action.
That's right. Which brings us squarely to the 12-step mandate, carrying the message. This action is described as the magnificent reality of the program. It's demonstrated by the eager action by which it carries our message to the next suffering alcoholic.
This is where that great paradox comes in, isn't it?
The great paradox of AA, exactly. I cannot keep the precious gift of sobriety unless I give it away. Service, doing 12-step work, helping others, it serves two functions. It's a guardian of individual sobriety, protecting your own recovery, and it's the springboard to the AA way of life, deepening that connection and purpose.
The shift in motivation there is just huge. The self, which used to be laser-focused only on its own needs, its own survival, now finds that its survival actually depends on forgetting itself, on selfless action towards someone else.
It completely reverses the old pattern.
And what are the practical rewards mentioned for doing this service work consistently? Beyond just staying sober yourself, how does it enhance this new state of consciousness?
Oh, the rewards listed are immense. Life takes on new meaning. You get to watch people recover, see miracles happen right in front of you. Loneliness vanishes because you're suddenly part of this community. You have a whole host of friends. Service directly fights that isolation that was so defining in active addiction.
So the psychic change moves you from being someone who needs help to someone who can offer hope.
Exactly. You go from being a taker to being a giver.
Yeah.
And that active giving is what sustains you.
It's an incredible transformation, really. From being stuck in that egocentric prison to finding your ultimate meaning and trying to help someone else. But the literature seems to suggest the goal isn't just staying abstinent or being helpful. It pushes towards something more, emotional sobriety or serenity.
Yes, that's often seen as the kind of higher level of the spiritual path. It's defined using the classic term, achieving temperance.
Temperance. That sounds a bit old-fashioned. What does it mean in this context? It's not just about alcohol, right?
No, not at all. Temperance here means much more than just not drinking. It's described as the temperance of balance, of the middle between extremes. And it's applied to handling the whole range of human life challenges.
So, like, managing your basic instincts, handling success at work, navigating conflicts with people, all without swinging wildly between being overly elated or deeply depressed.
Precisely. The person in recovery needs to learn how to handle emotional instability, not just from bad stuff happening, which is obvious, but also from good things, from legitimate excitement, from success.
That's interesting. You hear people say they relapsed not when things were bad, but when things were great.
It's very common. They couldn't handle the emotional high soberly. So learning to handle success, promotions, money, intense joy soberly, with balance that's just as vital as learning to handle failure or loss. That balance, that ability to stay on an even keel through life's ups and downs, that's the real mark of emotional sobriety.
And tying this all together, integrating this new, more balanced self, step 9 comes back into playmaking restitution, making amends. But the meaning of amends is deeper than just, say, paying back money you owe.
Much deeper. The core meaning of the word amends is actually to change or improve. It's not just about recompense, though that's part of it. The outward act of making the amends, cleaning up the past, is vital. But the crucial internal change is that the person genuinely doesn't want to be that way anymore. The desire to change the behavior, driven by the spiritual shift, is way more important than just mechanically checking items off a list.
And this connects back to step 5, too, right? Sharing your story, your pain, your regrets with another person, that's described as a giant step toward healing. Why is that sharing piece so fundamental to the psychic change actually happening?
Because secrecy, shame, and isolation are the breeding ground for addiction. That's where the addictive personality thrives. When you finally sit down, bare your soul, tell the absolute truth about the worst things you've done, the deepest fears and shames you carry, you experience acceptance.
Acceptance from another person.
Yes, acceptance from another flawed human being, and through that, often acceptance from your higher power. You realize you can be accepted, warts and all, no matter what you've done. The past doesn't have to define you forever or mean you're beyond help. That honesty, that deep sharing, kickstarts the internal healing that makes the later outward amends of step 9 truly meaningful, because the intent behind the action is completely changed.
So the whole journey from Silkworth's diagnosis, shattering the ego's defenses, through the psychological shift outlined by James, and landing in the ongoing action of step 12, it really describes this dynamic, very practical process. It's about giving birth to a new self.
A new, authentic, and more compassionate self.
A self that finds not just freedom from the substance, but this profound, ongoing sense of peace and usefulness in the world.
Yeah, a state of consciousness that you actively maintain through daily practice, through service, and through striving for that emotional balance, that temperance.
So this deep dive really shows that the spiritual experience, or the psychic change, isn't some vague mystical cloud. It's a pragmatic, tangible shift. A change in consciousness from being locked in self-centered isolation to embracing deep connectivity and tireless action.
It's a process of reconstruction, turning that daily reprieve into a life that's vibrant, that's giving, that has real meaning.
And the commitment to living this new way, it has to be total, doesn't it? For your own survival, but also, as the literature suggests, for the good of the whole group, the fellowship.
Absolutely. It's seen as interconnected.
So here's a final thought to maybe chew on. If the addicted mind, as we said, projects a universe of grasping and alienation, and the new driving force in recovery becomes the desire to help others, then maybe consider this. Is this profound psychic change ultimately not just about getting your own personal freedom back?
What else would it be about?
Well, maybe it's about consciously choosing to live as an open channel for service. Making the survival and the spread of this message, this solution, actually more important than any other collective goal. The founders seem to believe that kind of commitment, that choice, was essential, not just for the individual's long life, but for the unity and survival of the fellowship itself.
That's a powerful way to frame it. A responsibility that comes with the freedom.
A powerful framework for the path forward.